Welcome to From Doubt to Destiny,
the podcast where dreams come alive. I'm Eden Ryder, the Dream Maker.
And I'm Stacie Trott, the Queen Maker. We're here to give your dreams the royal treatment that they deserve. Get ready to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.
I'm Stacie Trott here with my co-host,
Eden Ryder.
Thank you for joining us. If you're a first-time guest, we are having a conversation today about boundaries. If you've listened to an earlier podcast, and we recommend that you do so, we had a conversation around burnout. And we talked about all the things that we could think of connected to to burnout. And we shared some examples and we gave some takeaways. And now we're going to continue that conversation because I think one of the ways to not have burnout is by having boundaries in place. So what are boundaries? I looked up the definition and I came up with something that I think actually is apropos of this conversation. And so it says the definition of boundaries in relationships, they are distinctions between people that protect their well-being and integrity. They can be emotional or physical and can relate to time, space, finances, or other personal matters. Boundaries can help you feel emotionally comfortable and safe and can also help you maintain your own identity and protect your personal space. So they sound like great things and that we should all have them. But before we were opening up to talk about this, I said to Eden, I think women specifically are not taught growing up to have good boundaries. And so I think we have to learn as we evolve and grow up to create boundaries. And then Eden used the phrase that I think is definitely in attention around boundaries, and that's people pleasing. So just quickly, I'm going to frame every conversation that we have. We're going to have a topic. So today is about boundaries. We're going to discuss the tension around them, why we think this is something that needs to be discussed, some transformational thoughts, hopefully that some have had already, some will discover in the course of our conversation, and then some takeaways, things that you can think about, challenge yourself to maybe frame differently for yourself, and some calls to action where there's some things you might actually want to do in response to the way you're thinking about it differently. So with respect to boundaries and why we don't have them, maybe you should chat a little bit with me for the benefit of our listeners, Eden, about people pleasing.
Yeah. So it's funny because I feel like I'm in a good place now, or a much better place now with boundaries. But 100%, if we had this conversation probably 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I don't even know when, I would say I didn't have a lot of boundaries. And even the thought of it was like anxiety inducing, because I would definitely say the people pleasing, the like aware of like people's perception of me, a lot of the stuff we talked about and like the good girls and perfectionism, boundaries sound like scary to me, of like, but wait, like what's that person gonna think? And this person's gonna think I'm mean. And if I put this boundary in place for me, am I like just like creating a barrier, connecting myself off from these other people? Or like I think everything for me just goes back to like, what are they gonna think? So that people pleasing of, in that process of, you're worrying about everyone but yourself.
Yeah.
And so in that process, for me, boundaries has definitely been a reframe of, it's not a negative thing. It's about self-love. And then also kind of not teaching in like a, I don't know, looking down type of way, but like teaching people how to interact with you. Because I know for me too, like in relationships, I would definitely say like with my husband, we were dating, there's almost this like, at least for me, this sense of, I expect them to be mind readers of like, people should know how I feel. And like, you doing this is very intrusive, or like you reacting that way. Like, why would you do that? Like, you're offending me. Like, just all of this assumptions that people are doing this intentionally to like irritate me and aggravate me, when not realizing they're not. And maybe they're doing something they've always done and it just has worked for them. And it's you that's having a problem with it. So it also is a form of love for that person as well, because they're likely has nothing to do with you, and they're just doing something that's irritating you, but it's because you haven't put that boundary in place. So it's crossing a line for you that they would have no clue if you're not communicating it in some way.
I
So
think it's a form of love, like you just said,
absolutely.
for yourself and the other person to say, you're having an impact on me that I don't think you even realize. And we'll both, you'll probably be okay with it because you're unaware of it. I'm suffering in silence, which isn't a good thing. So I have to say something. Now, what happens when the person that you communicate with about, okay, yeah, there should be a boundary here and there isn't, so I need to put one here. And their response isn't, thank you so much for putting that for putting that boundary in place. I didn't realize that you needed that line, but where you put it is perfect for me. I don't think that's the typical response that we get when we put a boundary in place. So sometimes the thing you're afraid of happening happens. The person gets upset. They're frustrated with you. They don't like where you put the line. Kind of maybe give an example of a situation where maybe you decided to put a boundary in place and it wasn't just, oh, I didn't know. It was, I didn't know. And where you put this line, I don't like it. If that ever happens.
I think it's funny. I think this came another, so that's going to take me a little while. Maybe by
Okay.
the end of this episode, we can come back to it.
Okay.
However, I will say I do think there is levels to it. Like I think it can be very insightful because if that is that person's response, they probably don't care about you, at least the level either you need them to or
Yeah.
where it's going to work for you. So I think there's an awareness there, like especially when you first start like dating someone or if it's a coworker, like what it is. So I would say like with you saying that, like obviously if it was my husband who had that response, like we have to have a much deeper conversation and there's something going on there. So I can't be like, well, too bad, like this is it and I'm out.
Yeah.
Whereas if it is a acquaintance or someone, and if you communicate that, and especially if you're communicating it in a loving way, in a way that you're showing that like this is really affecting me, and if that is their response, they actually you should read that quote.
Yeah. I was
Think,
just pulling
yeah,
it up.
I was gonna say I think you should read that because they
Okay, so
probably
there are two quotes that we came across regarding boundaries that we both were like resonated with, and the first one is, which is humorous. It says, "If you're offended by my boundaries, then you're probably one of the reasons I need them," and I think that's apropos because I need this thing to orient different for me. If you're really unhappy with it, unless I've sometimes you can overshoot where the boundary line needs to be. And if you haven't had it and then you overcorrect, you can actually overdo it. But aside from those extreme examples where there's an overcorrection for an extreme situation, your issue with my boundaries should be kind of a highlight to me that, man, I should have put this in place a long time ago. So if you're offended by my boundaries, then you're probably one of the reasons I need them. And then the other one is daring to, and this is Brene Brown, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And I think that's what it really comes down to is I don't think anyone ever wants to be boundaryless. But you butt up against this. I don't want to hurt, anger, disappoint, offend. And one of the things I've learned in therapy is I am not responsible for other people's feelings. I am responsible for how I deliver and communicate, and it should always be from a place of love with respect. But if I'm having a whole internal conversation with myself around how I think you're going to respond, and then I talk myself out of saying what I'm going to say because I'm trying to manage how I'm feeling and manage you and how you're going to respond, that's too much for any one human to do. And I have been guilty of kind of rationalizing myself out of saying what I need to say. And it's come from a place of being concerned that you're going to be disappointed, angry, hurt, offended with what I'm going to say. So I'm going to keep it in, and then whatever doesn't come out of your mouth is going to come out of your body in some other way. So there's a manifestation of it because it's got to come out. It's just going to come out in a way that's probably not going to serve me as the host very well. What are you going to say to that?
No, I was just saying it's so funny you say that because especially with my now husband, but when we were dating, and it's probably, it had to have showed up before because I didn't just start doing it with him. I was very much so aware of not wanting to offend people. So I would never share my feelings. Like I would kind of like take it. But the funny thing is, the whole point was I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to offend that person, or I didn't want to like have this uncomfortable conversation. However, like you said, it's bottling up. So it's there. So I would go from, yes, not wanting to do this to the point that it would get so extreme that I would explode. So what I didn't want to happen would ultimately happen because I would let it build and I wouldn't speak in the moment.
Yep.
And my husband is the exact opposite. Like anyone knows, like
He's gonna give it to you right when he's
he'll
feeling
speak
it.
his mind. Like he's an open book about how he's feeling everything. And that's funny too, because I think I thought that I was like didn't wear my heart on my sleeve, which anyone who knows me, if I'm not speaking it, like my energy, my actions, like there is something bothering me, I just wouldn't share. Like
You wouldn't verbalize
I
it,
wouldn't verbalize it.
but
I
it
always
was
felt
coming through other ways.
absolutely. So it's funny, made me think of that is also, I think at times you're still, again, like you said, it's a disservice to yourself and the other person because you're being so, or at least I would say for myself, I'm being so aware of not wanting to offend someone or not wanting to hurt someone else. But in the process, I am kind of doing it to both because I ended up exploding anyway. So it wasn't the best version of myself who was then sharing those thoughts. So then once I did share them, they'd come about, I already offended him. B, I said it in a way that I wasn't coming probably from like a love and respect level. So now we're both tense and annoyed. So you can't even have, it's like not even the great time to have the conversation. So I think that's the thing too, is if you look at it is you're doing it in, like you said, a loving way, a respectful way, and it's a conversation, then that boundary can be communicated the best way, where I think we can get ourselves in not trouble, but like where that tension is if you're doing it from a place of that extreme of like, I'm beyond annoyed, I'm angry. Like if you're coming from that place, the
Yeah.
person on the receiving end likely isn't going to receive it because the energy you're coming out with at them with is going to kind of take away maybe the message and it's too extreme. So I think also how you're delivering your boundaries, if you ideally, sometimes maybe it has to happen in an extreme moment to even become aware you need it, but then if you can have another conversation when maybe it's
What I'm thinking of, yeah, what I'm thinking of is like talking it through with someone that's not in it. I think you
yes.
can get a great perspective of one, am I bugging out? Right? Am I kind of like, thinking about it incorrectly? And sometimes you're kind of putting something into the relationship or, you're projecting something that an objective third party is going to go, yeah, I don't think that's what's going on. And then maybe you were kind of, it's not, what I'm thinking is it's okay if in the moment you're not sure to say, but you take it to maybe some other neutral party and you say, hey, this is what happens and what do you think, and get a healthy perspective. And if your takeaway after talking to them is you probably need to have a conversation, something about that is unhealthy, and you can even maybe practice what you're going to say. I'm remembering a couple that I listened to on a podcast, and the wife said that she felt very kind of dominated by her husband and struggled to say what she thought and how she felt. And so she would write down what she wanted to say and then she would practice it to give herself, one, the courage, kind of get those muscles up, but then also to make sure by writing it down and then kind of rehearsing saying it that she was coming from a place of love and respect. So she was basically trying to not do it like in a moment of emotion, extreme emotion. And now she's calling him everything but a child of God because it's all.
Right.
So how she tried to, kind of deal with the fact that she needed to find her voice. She went into a very methodical way of pulling it out of herself so she could have these conversations. And I thought it was interesting because they were doing the podcast together and he was like, yeah, like, I think I remember him saying, oh, she's found her voice now. She's got no problem saying what she needed to. And so I think that's one of the takeaways is if you're hearing this conversation, you're like, I do that. I have the conversation with myself in my head and I talk myself out of telling the person how I'm feeling. Okay. Forgive yourself for that because you're human and you weren't doing it intentionally. And one of the ways, talk to a friend, bounce it off, and then get those muscles together. Practice. Maybe this is what I think I want to say, and someone else can tell you like, "Ooh, that was pretty good," or "Ooh, I wouldn't say it that way." I've actually at times said stuff and been like, "Yeah, don't say it that way." I think that actually just happened yesterday. I was at dinner with another couple, and I was like, "This person is irritating me, and I think I'm gonna say I'm over it." And they were like, and I was like, "Well, I don't actually want to say that, but." It's it's bottled and I want to get it unbottled. And so, was kind of talking through how I can maybe find a way to like, and then it's having the courage. It's having the courage to not shy away from that relationship, to not create distance, to not just slowly pull away because you're feeling this. It's like you're putting a boundary in place, but it's not a healthy one. It's not a communicated one. It's not an articulated one. It's like
ghosting.
yeah. Yes, yeah. I'm just gonna slowly withdraw myself from you, so you don't have as much access to me anymore. And in the course of doing that, I think you do both people the disservice of being able to be in healthy relationship with each other, getting the benefits of your gifts and your talents. And there are times when it's like the season for this relationship has come to an end. We're not talking about those. We're talking about the ones where I know there's a need to either communicate something, put a boundary in place, let them know they're stepping on my toe when they do this and it's creating an injury. Instead of pulling my toes away, sometimes it's like, nah, I'm like take a look down and pay attention to the fact that when you do this, you're causing an injury. And I can pull my foot away. That's one thing. But I can also let you know I would love it if you would be more mindful. Think through what you're going to say. There's a lot there, right? I'm thinking about relationship and marriage. There's like, I've literally had to say, your words are landing differently than I think you intend.
Yes.
And I'm not responsible for your intent. You are responsible for the impact. And I need you to make a different choice because it's landing on me in a way that does not feel good. And I should not be responsible for telling myself he doesn't mean to say it that way or he doesn't mean to hurt or offend. I'm gonna let you know the impact and you deal with your intent. And I don't actually even want you to tell me I didn't intend for it to be that way. Make a change. Because the impact, if it's not the one that you want, I'm letting you know how it's landing, and it's not my responsibility to then go behind and tell myself what you meant. Find a way to use your words differently. So that's, you get to a point where you find your voice if you didn't have it, because the alternative is like, you're going to go crazy. So boundaries are a good thing. I think we've acknowledged boundaries are something women can struggle with. Not all women do, but many have, and are. So what are some ways that you can find healthy ways to communicate your boundaries?
Yeah, I think like you said, it's funny. I'm more that person where I think I'm more in my head. So I think for a while I was definitely like the rehearsing in the shower. I think also, I think too, like again, depending which type of relationship it is, and it's also like you had just said, if you're thinking about like a significant other, like my husband, I'm definitely more. I've learned, and even going through like my coaching program now about like trauma responses and stuff like that. Like he's 100% fight for a trauma response and I'm 100% flight for a trauma response, which that is just combustion in and of itself. Like looking back to, it makes so much sense when we first started dating because everything in him is like, I want to do this now. Like we're going to address this now. We're going to have this conversation now. And then I'm running. Like even when I'm physically there, like I'm trying to get out of that room so fast. Like I do not want to talk to you. Like I shut down. So I think also learning that about each other, like when it's those really close relationships and it's not just like, you know what I mean? Like where it's that more
coworker,
distance, where it's an everyday thing. If you can also be aware of like you are two very different humans who process things differently and like not take that personally. Like again, if you can come into it of this person loves me, they have my best interest. Like, they're not doing this to irritate me, to offend me. Like, they're not, like, if you take them at value, that they're probably doing this because this is how they
Right.
know how to communicate and they're working on it. So us learning each other's communication, I guess, styles, and then also understanding how we respond. So, like, him knowing that me needing to take a step back, it's not me being like dismissive or trying to be disrespectful. Like, I genuinely need to gather my thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
decompress. And like,
Mm-hmm.
we at that time, I think we're triggering each other's trauma. So also, like I said earlier, if you're triggering someone and they're in a traumatic state, they can't have a level-headed conversation. So it's the worst time to talk to each other. So him giving me that space and realizing that, like, it takes time to get there. So this could also be multiple conversations. I'm not saying
Yes.
boundaries are easy or it's something that like overnight just happens, but giving each other space. And then even now for me, like, I would imagine he would say, so like, I'm so much better now at communicate. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time we've had like a blow up of that intensity. Like, we can now very much, like, I can communicate in the moment. We sense how each other are feeling. Like, it's a much easier conversation and just situation because we've learned each other. We've given each other that grace of knowing we both respond differently. We communicate differently. It's not personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say awareness of yourself, awareness of that person who you're having the conversation with. And there is, I think, an element of practice. Like, I think at first it is a little messy, or it can be messy. Like, I think might trip over. It might be like, that was rough. Like the first time I tried to have it.
Yeah.
And I think what you said, if there is someone you can kind of, can sound silly, but practice it on, who's not involved, like they're an innocent by like third party who can give a little insight, and like you don't have as much on the line. So if you're like me, who was more, I'm definitely more flight mode, where I get wildly uncomfortable of knowing I'm about to step into a conversation that can be uncomfortable. If I had the space to practice it, or even like you're preparing for a speech, like say it in the mirror, say it in the shower, it does help me, as silly as that sounds.
Do you still do that now?
I don't feel like I need to as much. I think I'm more comfortable, but I'm not going to act like it wouldn't be a situation. Like, there could 100%, I think, be a time where I would
But you
still
might
have
need to
to.
rehearse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
definitely
think
am
there's
more
nothing. I think I do it too, and not in the mirror, but I might like,
through your
you
run,
know,
like run it through. Yeah,
I might actually like use my husband as like, here's what I think I'm gonna say. What do you think? And
yeah,
then that's a version of practicing, even though I'm not looking in the mirror, and it's practicing, but with some I want feedback.
mm-hmm.
The problem with practicing in the mirror myself is I don't know if I'm doing it,
Right.
if it's landing well, or if I'm possibly kind of saying it in a way that is going to be offensive. So yeah, practicing is a good thing. If you feel like you need it, especially if you weren't good with boundaries. And it feels to me, the analogy I can think of is like, it's like when you first start working out, the muscles are not, they're
Right, they're not
small.
strong. Yeah,
So it's putting the reps in, you know, doing it organically and then you get stronger, and then it gets better, and then you're not in your head as much about it. And then you don't have to practice because you've kind of found, through the exercise of doing it, the ability to articulate what you need in a healthy way, and you're not in your head about how it's going to land for the other person.
yes,
And it doesn't mean that you don't care about that anymore, but you've actually done it enough times and gotten enough positive feedback that overall, minus, you know, the imperfections of being a human, you're going to be able to articulate what you need in a loving, kind, respectful way that's going to allow the other person to clearly know what you're looking for. And then however they respond, that's the piece you can't control, but that you're also not responsible for.
absolutely.
I'm going to show up as my authentic self, communicating, using my voice, telling you what I need, and then finding out how it's going to land based on your response, and being okay with that. Being okay with that, right? Being okay with like, what if they get upset? You'll respond. Keep your cool. That's the part, is like, well, if I'm concerned that they're going to get upset, then I'm going to be so in my head, I'm not going to say. I'm thinking of an example of that when I did it. And I think back, I was probably 15 years ago. I was a junior associate, and there was a partner who just his style was to email, send another email, and like in the course of a day, I could get, 20 plus emails from him. And it was driving me nuts. It was stressing me out. It was preventing me, like you said in another context, of I can't even do what I'm doing because I'm constantly being interrupted with these, and then I respond, and then a boomerang response comes back, and I'm just like, and I went to him, and looking back, I'm like, as an associate, you would think, where's the gravitas come to communicate to a partner this way? But I was like, you're stressing me out. These constant emails are a disruption, and I can't even accomplish the tasks and complete them because you're peppering me with your need to either follow up, or you have another thought you're concerned about. And I literally gave him a suggestion. And I said, can you open up an email in the morning? And as you're having thoughts that you want to communicate, just pop them in that email. And then at some point in the afternoon, you can send me one email with your thoughts that you had throughout the day. So you're getting them out, but I'm getting one basic, here are the things I'm thinking about, at some point when you can get to them, let me know. And then I can respond. And then he did that, and it was a much healthier relationship. Afterwards. So that was a boundary that I needed. And if I had allowed him to continue to pepper me, God knows where I would have ended up, because at some point I would have probably snapped from the stress of his constant style bumping up against me and causing real anxiety for me. So boundaries are a good thing. I think we've learned, even if other people don't like them, we need them. And I know for sure without them, you will find yourself in a place of burnout. And I think one of the things I think of now as I'm thinking of boundaries is the reason why they're good. One of the reasons is I'd rather have a healthy boundary than lose what could be a very healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if I just slowly withdraw myself to the point where we barely communicate anymore because I didn't know how to tell you what I needed, I lose the potential of all that could come in a healthy way from that relationship by not attempting to put a boundary in place. And there are times where you go to put a boundary in place and that person is not willing to respect your boundary. And then you may need to withdraw because obviously that sounds like this is going in the wrong direction. But to the extent they are able to respect, and then you can pivot, you could benefit from the beauty of the pluses that you could provide to each other's lives that you'd miss out on if you didn't put the boundary in place. I'm actually thinking about you and Steph and some of the explosiveness that you used to have in the beginning. Yeah. Imagine if you hadn't
absolutely
worked through that and gotten to the point where you are now. There's two little humans that wouldn't exist. And so how did you kind of get to the point where you were able to push through and put the boundaries in place? I think therapy is probably one.
100%. The interesting thing, though, is I didn't go to therapy until after I had my daughter. So we definitely worked through, granted, he was doing a lot of therapy. And I always used to joke that, like, I'm very well aware of my issues. So, like, why do I need to go to therapy? I'm working on them through myself, which I don't agree with. But I think a lot of it, is for our situation specifically, there was definitely those explosive moments, as you very well know, of us, I think, just missing each other. But I think funny, again, just think about this, I keep saying funny enough, but I don't know if this even answers it, but this is what is coming to mind, is for me, it was the relationships around him, if this is about to make sense. It was, he had, you and your husband included, but like just so many amazing human beings around him that I'm like, okay, like if all of these people have talk about boundaries, but like have kept him in their lives. And I'll never forget even like where we lived in Harlem, there's this pizza place downstairs. And we went, it was one of our like first dates. We had only been dating for like 2 weeks and already kind of had it was like New Year's Eve? Yeah, New Year's Eve. And we got into it a little bit like at that dinner 2 weeks in. And so he was super close to the owners. It's a husband and a wife. And the husband is like very warm and like right away came over, like all they're Italian, like chatting and like kiss on like each cheek and very warm the entire time. And the wife, she's very warm as well, but which is interesting, I think I'm the same way, but she kind of observed a lot more. So she said hi, but like from a distance, and was just kind of like watching. And then we had a overall good dinner, but at the end there was definitely some tension. And he was saying bye to the husband, and she came over to me and like put her hand in my face, and like I think she gave me like a kiss, and she was like, she said something along the lines of like, he might be difficult, or like something like, if you can like hang in there, I promise you he's worth it. And she said that to
Wow.
me. It was only like, again, 2 weeks in, and I was like already sensing this because I had already started like meeting people, and I'm like, okay, like I I am sensing this, but like there's something there. And then the more, I don't think I'd met you guys yet, but then like
We
meeting
met
you
like the
guys
next week
and
and you got into it then.
yeah, right. Literally every, oh yeah, because that makes
Super
sense. It was
Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Like 2 weeks
So
later. Yeah.
he just had so many amazing human beings in his life. And I mean, like people that I'm like, this is the support system. These are the people I want in my life. So if they're there, and again, recognizing people who would put boundaries in place, I'm like, they would have gotten rid of him a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I think if that answers your question
It
of,
does, and I just want to pause you there only because I'm like, if you're listening, you can't see this, but like my eyes teared up. And when you were saying the part when she was coming over, I felt like chills through my body. And for me, it was like she's about to describe a divine encounter.
yeah,
And I feel like, yes, she was observing you, but I also think in that moment, God like gave her the courage to come over and say something that she, obviously couldn't know for sure,
right.
but he utilized her in that moment to give you a nugget of truth that you could then put away and say, let me hang in there and see where this goes, because there could be some real beauty here in
Mhm.
spite of the pain. And so I love when we have those divine moments, because I don't know if it felt divine at the time, but here we are all these years later and you remember it. You're like, she put her hand on my face and this is what she said.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. And it's almost like when I'm aware enough now, when I'm having one of those moments where I'm like, thank the person who said it. And then I'm like, okay, God, I hear you. I appreciate you whispering to one of your children, go say this so that I can get it and I can have that, because 2 weeks in, ideally, it's not very typical, I think, to be having that level of
Move fast
that
through
level of
everything, but yes.
combustion. You were kind of intense right at the gate, and that could have been a like, oh wait, who is
That could
this
have been like a
person and
red
why am I
flag.
here? Yes. And no, we're not giving a commercial for like ignore red flags. I have no idea what you guys were fighting about at that table, but you just want to be kind of like able to be present to receive those divine encounters when they occur, because thank God that she had the courage. I think I said in an earlier episode, like a big part of where I have evolved into now is having the courage to say the thing that I feel needs to be said, even if I feel like, why on earth am I saying this to this person? Sometimes I don't even know. But I feel like I'm supposed to, and I'm grateful because I've been the recipient of someone else's courage. And so I find mine now, even when I feel like, oh, this is like the last thing I want to do right now. So thank God she said that, because who knows if she didn't, if you would have kind of been like, this is too hard too soon. Too hard too soon. So, okay. So I don't know how yes, you
I
answered
know.
my question about, yeah, how do you put a boundary in place when the other person maybe doesn't receive it well? And you had to find a way to get to boundaries, and you did it without therapy, but I guess you did because he had some. So he was probably using the tools he had in the relationship to help you guys navigate some of those hard parts. And now it sounds like you're able to communicate right in real time when something is feeling uncomfortable, where you're stepping on each other's toes. You're able to say it.
Yeah, and I think too, I think a lot of times too, if you focus on, I think our natural instinct to be like, it's the other person and like fix the other person. But going back to yourself and focusing on what you can control. I think the more also just like knowing yourself and not going right to like I think at times I felt like, oh well, he is doing this to me, like it's his fault, he's pushing this in me, like so it's not me, where it's like, well, if he's pushing it in you, there's something in you that he's like
Yeah.
pushing. So how am like what am I at cause for in this situation? So not going right to like, I don't want to say victim mode, but like victim mode of like it's all him, like I have nothing to change,
Yeah.
because I did have a lot. Like I was horrible with communicating my emotions. Like even once we got better at it, like I still would. It would take him like pulling a lot out of me to just communicate how I'm feeling. So realizing that I internalized a lot, and I don't think I realized how much I did. And I think it was that mind reading at well, like that, like well, the person would ask, or like they would recognize it, or I'm being a
They should
burden by
know.
sharing. Yeah. So there was a lot of work I had to do on myself of recognizing you don't share your emotions. Like I process, I've always been like, I'm very internalized things. Like I talk to myself more about like how I'm going to work through something. So it's been a muscle of even me sharing my process with others, or like going to others for advice, because I think my
Yeah.
instinct is to keep everything to myself, and like when I'm in a good place and I've already probably made a decision, maybe I'll share. So I think the
I'll
more
put
work,
people on notice after the fact.
yes, I think the more just that like inner work and like working on yourself, and just the more you can know yourself, like I think a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, but like you like are going to like date this person or trying this, or you're figuring, but like you don't, the biggest advice I had, I feel like I gave myself, is once I slowed down, like almost like dating yourself, like you know yourself inside and out, like you know what makes you tick, you know what lights you up, you know where you're like, okay, I have this to work on. Like when you're that self-aware, it brings a lot to the table for the other person, where I think, I don't know how, I feel like this has gone down to a level of like dating where wasn't thinking about that, but
It's a great place to talk about boundaries because I
yeah,
think it's one of the places where, with coworkers, you can just kind of like,
there's
you
not as
get,
much at stake, really, I think
and
is
you can
what,
also get escapes from them,
yeah,
right? Because you don't live with them. You're not with them on the weekends. So, but when you're in a relationship that turns into marriage, and then I can't escape this person in ways that, unless I choose, like, I got to get out of this thing, it forces you to do some of that. You're either going to do what you said, it's the other person, and if they don't change, this isn't going to work. So it's
right,
all them. Or you go, could I possibly be contributing just a little bit of something to this that might be affecting this dynamic? And then you have to see if there's any internal self work you can do. And I think that's the beauty of kind of like being, dare I say, shackled to each other. Then it's like, we've agreed, we're committed to be committed. So now I got to figure out how I'm going to do what parts I can do to make this a healthy, happy relationship. And I don't think there's another relationship in our lives that is the same as marriage that forces you to look at it. So if you don't have boundaries in your marriage, I think you can find other ways to be boundaryless, but that's the one that's like, it's going to keep on gnawing at you until you find a way to make this thing healthier. Like
yeah,
it'll slowly kill you if you don't find ways to figure out how to make it healthier. So I think that's why you went to the dating and then you went to the marriage, because it's kind of the quintessential place to talk about boundaries. Not that there aren't others, but it's also very relevant to your life. And I'm certain there are women who will be listening who are married and need to think about, do I feel like I have healthy boundaries in my marriage? And it's layered, right? Because it's not just marriage is the overarching umbrella, but in it, there's a friendship, there's a partnership, there's parenting if you have children together. There's just all these layers. And so there's room to look at the layers and go, do I have healthy boundaries? And one of the ways I think to look and ask, do I have healthy boundaries, is how well am I communicating what I actually think and feel?
yes,
Because if I am not communicating in a healthy way, the authenticity with love and respect of what I think and I feel do I have boundaries or am I just stuffing it? Right? You might think, oh yeah, I'm good but I'm not good because I'm not saying what I really feel. They're in relationship with some inauthentic version of me. I'm showing up with only parts of me and I'm keeping a lot of it otherwise compartmentalized and separate from you because I've made some decision that you can't handle these parts of me. So now I'm not showing up with all of me. And you said something earlier about you weren't good at verbally communicating, but you were communicating
Yes.
in other ways. And you were probably trying not to communicate in those other ways, but you couldn't help it because it's got to come out. The body will require it to come out some way. For me, it's my face. I'll be like, I'm fine. I'm fine. But and thank God I have a partner who, has known me so long that even when I'm like, no, really, I'm fine. He's like, unfortunately, I can see all over your face that I'm not. And there's been times where even like in other relationships of just out in the world with other people where I end up communicating something that I was trying really hard not to communicate, but my face just would not cooperate.
Right.
So, I think it's a self-awareness thing. Like, I think, we need the boundaries because we're not as self-aware of where we actually are in relationship, if we're not actually looking at where the boundaries should be, what do we want. And I think we run the risk of not being known when we don't have boundaries.
Yeah, like truly, like you're set, like
Correct.
authentically. Yeah.
Correct. You don't really actually know me because I'm keeping all these parts of me from you because I've decided to manage. And I think women do that a lot. We manage. We manage how we are feeling, and then we manage how we think you're going to feel. And then we'll just hold it in. And it's like, no, let me just tell you how I feel and let's work it through. And the word that I thought of when you mentioned awareness and practicing, I thought of the word trust, and I wrote it down so I
Yes.
wouldn't forget, because I think what I heard and what I kind of just know from watching the evolution of your relationship with your husband is you moved into a place of trust where you were then able to say what you feel because the relationship became and you became a safe place for each other.
You know what? I think that's a beautiful thing to bring up as well. I think before whoever it is, also knowing who you're talking to. And I think that was such a reminder. Like even my husband would say, he's like, I'm on your team. Like, why are you like attacking me? Like we both want to win here. So if you can go into it
Yeah.
not like of realizing that like this person like hopefully and ideally in most of these situations these people care about you, they love
Yeah.
you, they want what's best for you, like it's going to be a win-win for everyone. So if you can go into the conversation like you said, like with that trust, with that love, even thinking this is a positive thing, so not going into it of like, oh, this is awful and this person's going to respond this way. So if you can set the expectation like this is going to go well and this person cares about me and this person like I care about them, so having that and realizing that like who's at the receiving end of it, because at the end of the day if it's someone who you don't really care about, they're not adding anything to your life, it can be an abrupt like this is just it's a no. Like I also that is one thing I am more working on is not over explaining myself. Like I tend
Yes.
to have to be like, I can't do this because of this, or I have this going on, like feeling like I need it to be a worthy reason to say no. Like when I get invited to do things or like dinner, you know what I mean? Like anything going on and that like no can be no and that's fine.
I think the
So
phrase is no is a complete sentence.
yes, exactly. And even lately I've been trying to tell it like there's, if you, I think we said it was in like your definition beginning, but if you even think of boundaries as like everyone has limited amount of resources, whether that's like time, energy, money, like whatever it is. So I think, I don't know if it's a quote or whatever, but like a no to someone else can be like a resounding like yes to yourself. So you're saying no to this, but you're saying yes to something else. So you don't need to explain yourself of like, I can't do this because it's just, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Or even, I don't know. I also say I'm sorry a lot. So maybe I need to work on
Thank
that.
you so
So,
much for the invitation. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it, but I
right.
truly appreciate you thinking of me.
Yes. So I need
You
to,
can use that one.
those are areas I
Notice
definitely
I
need.
didn't apologize. I acknowledged, the invitation. I validated that you took the time, right, to extend the invitation. So that means something to me, but I won't be able to make it.
Right. So yeah, working on that one.
Self-love, kind, clear. Yeah. And I've had to like listen to various things to kind of hear like no is a complete sentence. I learned very early on in my career though that if I was going to succeed in a way that I was going to be respected, I was going to have to learn how to say no and not have to and choose not to explain. So it's not, I can't make the call at that time because I have a doctor's appointment or, I'm going to a funeral or whatever, right? It's got to be this important big reason. It's like, I won't be able to make it. I'm not available at that time, but here's when I am available.
Right.
And so it's about, you asked about my availability. I'm going to respond whether I can or I can't. And if I can't, when I can. And that's all that we need to talk about.
Right.
And that's okay. Now, if it's a different relationship, it's a, family member, friend, you may feel like you want to explain because we have a different level of relationship, but doing it because I want to versus doing it because I feel like I have to. Because if I don't, that's the people pleaser.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to say no, but I don't want you to be upset. So I want to make sure I give you a good reason so you feel like I'm not turning you away because I don't have an important reason. And it's like, what if I don't want to go because I'm tired?
Right.
What if I want to go because that's not interesting to me? What if I don't want to go because I'm not excited about that? What if I don't want to go because I want to stay home and watch TV? Like, what if the reason isn't a good reason, but it's a good reason because it's my reason? And that's part of that self-love is like having that. So I don't know if we had a plan for where we were going on boundaries. I think you were going to add something else.
No. I was funny. I was just going to say, I feel like we could go on. This is one of those topics. Like, I'm even thinking about recently. It's been like everything with my daughter. Like I'm at an age where I'm like, shoot, we had no boundaries because everything was kind of easy and flowing. And like, now I need to put all of them in place because she's about to be 2 and we have another one coming. So I'm not going to get into that because I feel like that could be a whole other conversation.
A parenting episode.
But
boundaries with our children.
Yeah. But it's definitely like I'm like all about boundaries right now with her. And I think it just makes you think even again, like a kid, like they're going to want like cookies every meal or like this or that. So again, recognizing like there might be that tension there, but it's good.
It's good.
Like,
tension doesn't mean
children thrive better with boundaries. So it's it's good all around.
You're not doing them any favors by saying yes to everything. Because
Exactly.
like I want them to like me. I want them to be happy with me. It's like, that's not how life works. And if you don't prepare them for how life really works, life will prepare them unkindly when it matters. So thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you for listening. We hope that we've encouraged you to think about boundaries in your life differently, from the smallest humans in your life to the biggest, deepest, longest relationships. And just invite you to take a look around, think about it. Is there any part of you you're holding back? Do you find yourself internally editorializing your thoughts to the point where you don't say how you really feel? And we invite you to attempt to trust yourself and the people in your life, having honest, open, kind, and loving, authentic communication with them. Hopefully you'll be able to have deeper connectivity with the people around you by showing up with some of this transformative way of being with them. So until next time.
Thank you.
Remember to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.